Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Orfinger, the market president and publisher of the Washington Business Journal. And on behalf of both the Baltimore and Washington Business Journals, I want to welcome you here today. We have a great session planned for you this morning. The pandemic has forced all of us to rethink and rethink and rethink many aspects of our personal lives and our work lives. As employers, we've needed to rethink our work lives, what changes we'll need to make to accommodate a return to work for our staff, what will be the long-lasting changes, and what will be just temporary. How will we and our staffs settle into these new realities? And as individuals, many of us and our employees are rethinking our relationship to work. I could speak for myself that it causes a lot of stress thinking about it. And many of us are thinking how we will all manage this new hybrid environment and keep some of the good things we've all experienced these past few months. And then all of this needs to be thought about in the context of our reckoning as a nation and as a community with the racial and income disparities that have become so very evident since the killing of George Floyd last summer. How do we continue our march forward to remedy these long-standing gaps and inequalities? Today's conversation is just one step, and we at the Business Journals are proud to be partnering today with CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield to bring this discussion to the forefront for all of you. So without further words from me, I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend at the Business Journal in Baltimore, Rhonda Pringle. Rhonda?
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, everyone. I'm Rhonda Pringle. I'm the market president and publisher for the Baltimore Business Journal. I want to thank you for joining us for a conversation that businesses, if they haven't already started having, will soon start to have as we emerge from the pandemic. During the discussion, if you have any questions you would like to ask our guests today, please ask via the questions panel, and we'll take the last 10 minutes to address a few of those questions. In the handout section of the control panel, you will also find that you can download our event packet, which contains information about our wonderful panelists and our partner CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield. Today's conversation is being interpreted by Anessa Hughes with HASA. Thank you, Anessa. Currently, we're at a crossroads of employee and employer conversations centered around how we reimagine the workplace post-COVID. To talk about what the future holds and how we build a healthier work culture moving forward, I want to introduce today's panel. Joining me are Angela Sulliston, EVP, Chief Human Resources Officers, CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Christy Grinnell, VP Information Technology and Supply Chain and Global CIO, General Dynamics IT. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Rhonda. Thanks so much for having me today.
Rick Uther, President and CEO, Independent Can Company.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Open discussion.
And Andy Shalal, Founder and CEO, Busboys and Poets.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Glad to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. Each of you represents a different industry, so we're excited to hear from these different perspectives. All of you have been impacted in very different ways by the pandemic, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to jump right in with the first question. As organizations have started to make changes to go back to the office or remain remote or implement a hybrid work model, can you talk to us about some of the workplace changes your organization has undergone? And then part of that, who was involved in the decisions and how have you approached communicating? So let's start with you, Christy, about what changes you've undergone and how you made those decisions and communicated them.
Sure, Rhonda, thank you. And thanks again for being here for this important discussion. The world changed around us, and that is definitely true for GDIT. Prior to the pandemic, the majority of our employees, being in the government contracting industry, worked in the office because they had to be in a SCIF, they had to be at a customer site because of the role that they had, or that was just more of the culture that we had because of working so closely with the military and our government customers. And then all of a sudden on March 13th, we sent everybody home overnight. And as the global CIO, when you do that, you're crossing your fingers and holding your breath that all of your systems are going to stay on and be able to support that scale. But we actually knew they would. We had some people working from home, and we just had to make sure it scaled to do that. So ensuring that we had tools like what we're on now, Zoom, Teams, whatever the customer needed for us to collaborate with them, we had to make sure we could roll that out in a secure way, given the type of work that we do. But we also really had to think about our employees and what this meant to them. We had some employees that were coming into the office no matter what the situation was because of the type of mission work that they do for our customer. They had to be there to get their very important mission work done. But if the role allowed, they could work from home, which all of a sudden, how do I collaborate? How do I do this? So first and foremost, we made sure that our employees understood that their safety was our primary concern. We worked with our employees, with our customers, with our subcontractors, with any of our business partners to really ensure that we were complying with CDC guidelines, complying with state, federal, and local mandates on what they were doing. And then also shifting from this location-centric mindset to an employee-centric mindset. What tools do people need to do their job? How can we make sure that we're able to continue putting in our IT solutions and proposals that are innovative for the mission? And doing that collaboration remotely is now very differently, or done very differently. Also making sure that people knew how to connect with one another, using our tools that we had in place, whether it was instant messaging and chat, whether it was video meetings like this, or even continuing to use email. Some people, having been at the customer site for the whole time on government furnished equipment, all of a sudden had this new way of working that they had to think about. So really thinking about that agility and flexibility that people needed and the tools that they needed. And then lastly, we really have to think about how do we remain competitive. And this is really going forward, now that people have seen what it's like, our customers are more willing to let people work from home or work from anywhere. And so we are also willing to do the same. And we're having those conversations with our customers and our employees, giving them that flexibility, giving them that choice where it's possible, given our mission. And then that means that we are going to continue to look at all of our infrastructure, including our IT systems and tools, but our real estate portfolio as well, and making sure that we can still collaborate and provide the best solutions to our customer mission, but also in a competitive way, because real estate portfolios are shrinking. And this involves everybody, right? In order to make this happen, you have to have the divisions and the programs who are working on the mission, our contracts team who's changing and amending contracts to ensure we're doing things by the letter of the law with our customers, our finance and facilities team, IT, myself and how we do this, and the tools that we offer in a secure fashion, legal, making sure we're meeting all those mandates, HR for sure, and in many different ways, thinking about diversity and inclusion and everything that's happened while we've been home during this pandemic. Learning development, how do you continue to train your people in this new way of working? And a lot of that has to happen with communications. That's been really key during this time as well.
Thank you, Rick. I know you had employees that were considered essential, so you had a different approach in manufacturing. Share with us about how your workplace changes, how you develop them, and then the communication.
Okay, we have about 400 employees. We have 5 manufacturing plants in 3 states and a warehouse out west. When the COVID hit, we sent 70 people home almost immediately. The engineering department could go home, the finance, the sales, it worked very well. And our IT department was really prepared for this. Within hours, I think when we said, you gotta go, we packed everybody up, they went home, and I don't think we missed a beat. Currently, the only people working at home are really finance and sales. So we have about 40 people still working at home, and 330 have come in for the entire time. And we're really blessed by people that were really committed to what we're doing. They were loyal to what we're doing. We communicated very rapidly and on a very regular basis, weekly. The executive leadership team was on Zoom daily, multiple times, talking about what we heard, what we believed, what the realities were, and cascaded that information down through the organization, through our newsletter, through our word of mouth. We have scrolling screens in each facility that is managed out of the Belcamp headquarters. Our Vice President of HR, Ebony Gales, really was our coach and our leader in that, to make sure we were communicating effectively and consistently. Communications are by far the most important things. If people don't know what's going on, then they worry. People can accept good news, bad news, but not no news. You really got to keep people in the loop. And to a great extent, the ELT was coming into the office on a rotating basis. We didn't want to have the leadership of the team all there at one time, but we tried to spend time on the floor, listening to people and understanding them in their place, because everybody's reality is different. And when you're moving from the Maryland area to the Ohio area to the Iowa area, the beliefs in what was happening were very different. So you really didn't judge, you listened and understood, sympathized in some cases, but always showed empathy for the folks and made sure they knew we were all in this together and we were all concerned about each other.
Thank you. Angela, talk to me about CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield's approach.
Yes, I think the panel so far has really touched on some key points here this morning. I've heard quite a bit about, adjusting when the pandemic hit. We all did the same. We have almost 7,000 associates and contractors, and we too went home early March, and have been home. 95% of us have been home ever since. And so, communications has been probably our biggest challenge, but also our, I think, biggest strength since we've been home. My CEO, Brian Pinnock, likes to say, when you say something over and over and you're near exhaustion, you're probably only halfway there, right? And getting your point across and communications out. So our communications, we focused on town halls, our associate communications group in marketing. We've done different training techniques. So like Christy mentioned, instead of stand up and in person, we've really allowed for our associates to access training wherever they need to. We've gotten a little bit more creative in our training and have made them much more interactive. Everyone has been stepping in to get involved in communications. And I think it's important that the communications are regular, especially in times of uncertainty. They don't always need to be buttoned up. We've been able to tap different voices like our associate resource groups, our employee resource groups, our teams that are throughout the organization, both informal and formal teams around communications. I'll share with you an example. We were pushing health and wellness for some time, and we really wanted our associates to continue to access the benefit platforms that we use. And it wasn't until, we used to send out written communications about this, but it really wasn't until our benefits team got on camera and they really started to talk about real life examples of how they've been able to leverage our benefits. And then we saw adoption, skyrocket. So, really leveraging your entire workforce to get messages out there, I think is critical. And really taking a much more personal approach to your communications has been really beneficial and key for us in this remote environment.
Thank you. Andy, few industries were impacted like the restaurant industry. So talk to me about how you work with your team to communicate and the changes you had to make.
Well, I think, the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry, as you said, probably was impacted greatly. Obviously, I can't say the most because there's other industries that have been impacted the same. Bars in particular were hit extremely hard, and we really didn't know what to do at the beginning. It was one of those things because we can't really just suddenly pivot to work at home. We're not that kind of industry, so we have to show up and not only show up, but also we have to interact with people. We have to interact with customers, and the fear of the virus and the fear of COVID created all kinds of challenges. So we were pivoting on the hour practically. So pivot became the new normal, so to speak. And we started really making quick changes. We were fortunate in that we had a very robust online presence already in our business, and it was easier for us to be able to switch. And I know that one of our major roles was how do we keep the lights on, no matter what, even if you have 2 employees working. And before the pandemic, we had almost 600 employees in our team. So the idea of sending pretty much 90% of our staff home was a very, very difficult situation. Of course, many of them are part-timers, many of them have other jobs, many of them didn't have to be there. They didn't depend on that only job as their source of income. So that was a good thing. The communication, of course, restaurants as well aren't known to be great communication hubs. We have people that have multiple hours. They come in at different times. They have different ways of communicating. We don't have an office where we can all sit, together and huddle and be able to have a conversation. And as Angela mentioned, repeating, things, 10 times, 100 times that are exhausted is sometimes not even enough. We started to really focus on how do we get back to some kind of normal? And we changed our vision of what normal is almost on a daily basis and started to fill in the gaps and the people needed in order to make that happen. We were also providing, a lot more leeway for our staff, a lot more sick leave, being paid for the time off. We didn't want people to come in because they had to come in because they couldn't pay their bills, and then put everybody else at risk. So we made sure that they had plenty of time off, plenty of sick leave. In the restaurant business, the whole idea of showing up is important. And if you have the sniffles or something, take some Advil and suck it up. Was the old-fashioned way of doing things that did not fly anymore. You had to really show up to work healthy. And if you're not healthy, you were sent home, like by decree. You weren't allowed to stay. You weren't saying, you weren't allowed to say, I'll be okay. Don't worry about me. It was not, no, I'm not worried about just you. I'm worried about everybody else around you. And so it became a whole different way of seeing things and seeing how health and welfare of each individual impacts everyone else in the space, as well as customers that are coming through the door. So we learned really to make quite a bit of changes. And I think, the restaurant industry is not known for great benefits. Oftentimes people are transient in that business. They come and go. We have been fortunate to have a pretty good, benefits package to begin with. And we just about doubled it really since the pandemic, increasing the amount of time off, allowing a lot more flexibility, giving a lot more time for people to spend time with their families as they needed, and childcare. Making sure that they have the proper childcare in order for them to be able to show up to work. Because many folks in our industry are single mothers or single fathers who have to take care of their children. And of course, if you don't have the right childcare, you're not going to be able to show up to work, or you're not going to be able to show up to work, fully prepared to do the job. So lots of changes, lots of pivoting. We continue, actually. It didn't stop after things got looser. We continue to make those changes. We continue to constantly be on the lookout of what's the latest and greatest things that we can do in order for us to not only maintain a healthy culture inside, work culture, but also be more competitive in the industry.
I'm glad to hear you mention that, because so many people would show up in the office sick as sort of almost like a badge of honor. I showed up anyway to do my job, or they didn't feel that they had the permission, right, to admit this and take care of themselves. So that's one of the positives from all of this, is we started to prioritize our own health in a way that we never have before. So all of you mentioned how critical communication has been through this whole process. Obviously, connection has been essential because, as Rick pointed out, the unknown is very scary. You know, it's better to have an answer than no answer. So I want to talk a little bit more about how you're keeping your employees engaged. When we talk to CEOs and they talk about what they miss the most from an, in-office environment, is that feeling of connectivity and maintaining their culture. So how has your organization been addressing employee engagement and a feeling of connection to shape your company's culture among employees? And I'd like to start with you, Angela, as our HR person.
Well, thank you. So, wow, how do we keep employees engaged? You just got to try different things. I had a town hall just the other week, and one of my new hires mentioned that, before we start every meeting or, meetings with new people, you should just ask people, what's their story? What shapes them? And I thought that was like wonderful. We had breakout groups to say, what's been your favorite way of staying engaged and connected? And we heard a lot of, asking people how they're doing, taking a few moments to give a person a call. When we do Zoom calls, associates, I had new hires yesterday just tell me how they love the breakout groups when they can get into more intimate sessions with 2 or 3 in the breakout groups to just talk and work through problems, work through feelings, work through, business issues. So, and I've been really doing different things, and a lot of our leadership team members have as well. I'm a podcast host now. I feel like I'm in the podcast business. I've tried that, town hall, skip levels. I think I'm meeting more people throughout the organization just by doing skip levels all the time. And I think, these are ways to really keep people engaged, ways to keep connections. We have our CEO who does a town hall every other week. And with this town hall, we're speaking to 4,000, 5,000 associates at one time. But there's an opportunity for others throughout the organization to speak. So we're constantly sharing, here's what's happening throughout the business in areas outside of your own area. Because we found in Zoom meetings, a lot of times we get in the habit of just talking to the folks that are on our team. So this gives associates an opportunity to see employees and leaders all across the organization. So these town halls have been wonderful. Turning on the chat feature. I think in the beginning, we were all afraid of the chat feature, but the chat feature has been, a way for associates to connect, encourage, give attaboys to each other, and also have that back and forth dialogue and not just speaking out. Lastly, we used the chat session on a recent diversity a week long of diversity training. And we used, I think it was the actually Teams platform, where associates talk to each other about the articles and the videos that they read around diversity and equity and inclusion. And so the conversation was very raw, it was very authentic, it was timely, it was in the moment, and it was amongst associates throughout the organization. So, those are just a few ways we've been able to keep our associates engaged.
Thank you. Christy, I want to hear from you because you have such a large organization, and as Angela pointed out, you can sometimes communicate in silos when you're just doing Zoom meetings. So talk to us about how you're keeping everybody engaged and connected.
Yeah, I mean, this has been something that you always have. We have almost 30,000 employees at GDIT, and you want to make a big company feel small regardless of the situation. And the pandemic just increased that need to be able to do it. Because instead of people being able to travel and come to collaborate and be a part of the meeting or be a part of the solution, now they're sitting at home and thinking, does anybody even know I'm here? Hello, knock, knock, is anybody behind that screen? So really increasing the amount of communication, but communicating also in a different way. So our president was very quick to get on video and start sharing video messages with our team. And things were changing so quickly, it really couldn't be on a regular schedule. It had to be based on what was going on in the world. And you wanted to hear from her that we were keeping our employee safety first, that we were still proud to support our customer mission, because the customer mission can't stop because of the global pandemic. And so those messages were really important to hear from her. And then we had leaders forums where, traditionally we would get people in a big ballroom, few people would be on the phone who couldn't make it, they could barely hear, you rarely heard from them because it was hard to interject. Now all of a sudden you have all of your leaders all in the same Brady Bunch box on the screen, able to participate and be a part through the chat, through the breakouts, and through asking questions, which really started to engage us in a different way, hearing everybody's voice in the same way. And the organization really became flat. But the shape of the meetings also, changed. As Angela said, you're having these team meetings, you're having these one-on-ones, you're having skip level discussions. And instead of it only being, so what did you do today? Tell me the status of this, all of these things, you're saying, hey, I see your kid in the background. How old are they? I didn't know you had 3 dogs. I'm a cat person, you're a dog person, whatever the case may be, right? So you're engaging in a different way than you had before. I learned some hobbies that my team had that are really creative and exciting, that started to create a dialogue that you could connect in different ways. And then you started to connect it, and we, as an example, the amount of musicians we have at GDIT is amazing. I mean, we could create like a week's worth of concerts and have a palooza if we wanted to, with the amount of amazing musicians that we have. But you would ask things, about, what's your favorite movie and that sort of thing. And then we did other things to connect. This happened in March of 2019. In April every year is typically Bring Your Child to Work Day. We didn't want that to stop. That's something really meaningful for all of our employees. So we brought our kids to Zoom, right? And now all of a sudden, instead of, people only being able to do it if they were near an office, we had people from Dubai, people from Brazil, people from Central America, all coming in with their children to Zoom and seeing what we do and encouraging them to have a career in STEM. Connections that we never would have made in the physical workplace, but instead we could make over this. And then last but not least, we have 9 ERGs that really became a critical linchpin to what we do at GDIT. We knew they were important. We knew it connected people in different ways. But during the pandemic, especially at the beginning, but they're still going strong. We've had more participants than ever. You have people connecting at different levels. Sometimes you'd have a conversation where, all of a sudden you figured out that the people who are home living alone in this, as the time went on, it was really becoming a drain. So we started to connect them in a different way and show them that there was support out there in a different way than we did those who have their family and their dogs and their parents living in the same house, and they have their own sense of chaos. So those employee resource groups became a safe place to have that conversation and connect in a very different way than you do in the team meeting.
Well, Andy, I want to hear from you, because your way to connect had to be very different, because your team, your staff was coming in. So how did you keep everybody engaged, wanting to come in, feeling excited and safe, given that they were dealing with the public? Talk to us about that engagement.
Did you ask me? Were you mentioning me, Rhonda? I'm sorry, I didn't hear my name. Yes, we have been doing DEI and accessibility stuff before it became an acronym. This is something that is built into the culture of the organization from day one. We are a place where racial and cultural connections have always been uplifted. Our team is extremely diverse. Our top, and it's not just the people you see on the line, but people you see behind the scenes, all the way up to the very top, are made up of Black women, men, people of different backgrounds, and different industries as well, that come together because they come here for the culture that we've created. We have an award-winning, actually, a culture program that we do where we talk about race with our staff, talk about the ideas of what does equity look like. And it's not just the conversations that we have, but we actually implement those things into into the workplace. We don't just talk about, race, we don't talk about equity, we don't talk about just that. We actually have a culture that does uplift that and does live its mission, which I think is really great and has helped us in this process of change that we're all undergoing. I think we're finding ourselves having the need to touch base with employees a lot more than we had in the past. And I think, as Rick and others mentioned, that being quiet, it doesn't mean you're happy. That we need to actually ask you more directly, be able to have more opportunities for you to speak your mind and not feel intimidated, not feel uncomfortable doing that. We've done a lot more training. We've increased our training in order for us to make sure that everybody understands our mission. And really, people come into this industry, especially the restaurant industry, very skeptical. Many restaurants are transient, they come and go. People are not always treated fairly, they're not always treated equitably, they're not always treated with dignity. And I think we've created a culture that really allows for that, and we really kind of live that. And so for people to start believing that this is different, that this is an opportunity for them to really, have a different perspective on the hospitality industry and the way that it's been. Harassment is plentiful in the hospitality industry. There's a lot of wage theft in the hospitality industry. There's all these things that happen in the hospitality industry that people just get used to and just say, oh, this is just the industry. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think part of it is we want to professionalize and really elevate the standards that this industry has had for many years. So we're part of the Restaurant Opportunities Center that really tries to elevate and showcase some of the best practices that restaurants are doing. And we're proud to be a founding member of that organization. So, having done the foundational work, it was easier for us to actually move forward during this pandemic time because, obviously there needs to be some changes, but we already had the channels to provide those changes and the open-mindedness to make them a reality for our team.
Thank you. So Rick, talk to me about in manufacturing, and you talked about the fact that you're in markets that had drastically different perceptions of COVID and the way that you needed to communicate and engage with them. I imagine in some of those markets might have been different. So talk to me about your approach to employee engagement and connectivity.
Okay, we're a family business where we have about 400 employees. A good bit of, I'm third generation, my son in the business is fourth generation. We have a lot of family members that work throughout the business. A good bit of my time is really managed by walking around. People whether they like to see my face or not, they don't tell me they don't. So that's a good thing. Something that's unique about us is the fact that I'm in front of everybody all the time. I don't hide in my office. I spend time out. I have a camper. During COVID, it was not easy to travel. Camping was the safest way to travel. Each of our facilities have a 30-amp plug-in. I go and plug into the plant and spend a couple of days in each plant visiting with people, one-on-one, in groups, just being where they are in their space. So it's really important. And my grandfather, my father, and my son, we all are persons. Now, it's tough to get to everybody on a daily, weekly basis that way. And we've set up daily and weekly meetings with all hands on deck from departments generally, and to keep people as much engaged as we can. And some of these meetings are having 40 people in sales all on the Zoom and talking about what's going on in the business. The next day might be a happy hour where everybody brings the drink of choice, whether it be an adult drink or a soft drink, and you don't talk any business. You spend time just getting to know each other. People bring their cats, their dogs, their gerbils to these, and their kids. And the kid's always in the background going, ah, when their mother doesn't know that they're doing that. So it's really been interesting. We have more people informed of what's going on in many cases, because where you might have a stand-up meeting in the office before pandemic and 3 people hear the message, now the message is shared with 30 or 40 people. And we've got salespeople that technically have grown tremendously in their knowledge of day-to-day activities. We bring in internal speakers on a daily and weekly basis to speak with groups they normally don't interface with. We bring in external speakers to the Zoom meetings to talk about what's going on, such as this type of an environment where they can hear from someone else. So to keep them fresh, it really gets changed up. And days might be just talking about what happened over the weekend and making sure it is relaxed and comfortable, and also talking about how we get better at this each time. It's amazing how effective it's been. We've had new employees make friends over Zoom and then start conversing outside of the business on a daily basis. We hired a training manager during this period of time and to look through process and procedures so that you're not working on historic knowledge that's transferred person to person, but is more built into the fabric of the business, and people can read documentation either online or in paper. So it's really been kind of an amazing thing. We are just now starting to do some group get-togethers, having a cookout for each shift. It's just starting up in the next week or two. We've gone now 7 weeks with no positives in our employee base. So we're really feeling good about that. The challenge is, I believe, and we don't do a formal survey, but I believe we've only got about 45% of our total population vaccinated. There's a lot of personal concerns from technology to religious, and we don't judge. We just try to ask people to be careful, protect their coworkers, and be aware of their surroundings. We all carry a mask in our pockets at all times in case somebody feels uncomfortable. So it's about communicating on a one-to-one basis and as groups quite often.
Thank you. And I love that we are getting to see another side of our coworkers in ways we never have. It's like, I had no idea you had 4 dogs. I mean, so it really has been great, and something that I hope we don't lose in this transition as we all sort of figure out the space of remote work versus working in an office. So I want to start with you, Andy, because you mentioned in this next question, I want to start with you because you talked about how you lived this mission of D&I before it was, sort of this acronym. And we can't overlook what's gone on over the past year. I think it's shaped all of our thinking and certainly should play a role in everybody's D&I strategy and how they switch it up. How has your organization made changes to create a more equitable and inclusive environment for your employees? And more importantly, what kind of commitments have you made to foster a safe space for employees, all employees, to feel comfortable communicating their concerns?
We've hired more people to actually do outreach internally for our employees. Again, as I mentioned earlier, silence doesn't always means that a person is happy or satisfied. So we actually go looking for opportunities to engage with employees and get them to speak up. We have created, I think, a pretty good culture that really allows for an open communication. I give out my cell number and my email address to all my staff. They're able to call me at any time, weekends, nights, whenever, to be able to ask a question that they cannot have answered by someone else for whatever reason. And I'm always available and willing to listen and willing to hear them out. And I think that's really very, it's interesting how shocked they are when I do. I also do all the orientations for our staff when they first come in. Like I said, we have a lot of staff, so we don't do it all the time. But once in a while, probably about once every 3 weeks or so, we bring together a cohort and I do an orientation with them. And my orientation is really around race, around the conversations that we're having today, around the politics of where we're living, about the issues that are important to them. I think somebody mentioned, I think Angela was mentioning about hearing stories that people have. Those types of things really connect people in a way that just telling them this is what's going to happen and you can come and talk to me isn't enough. So I'll tell them my story, they'll tell me theirs, and by the end of a 2-hour session, people have a much better understanding of each other, where they're coming from, who they are. I then hand them my cell phone. and they're, they don't abuse it. I don't get like tons of calls every day. Once in a while, the calls that I get are really significant and important and worthwhile for me to pay attention to. So I think, those types of opportunities and, people, again, this industry is not an industry that has been full of trust. This is an industry that's been very secretive and not very transparent and all of that. And I think we have tried to create a more open understanding. It takes a while for people to buy into that or believe it. And it takes time, when they see it being done over and over again. And I, as the CEO, remind them, this is who we are, this is what we do. I think they're much more willing to come forward. It makes it easier. When the CEO speaks up and says that, it makes it easier for all the other departments to do their job. You know what I mean? It's not enough to have to sort of farm out your DEI work to your HR department. It sounds like it's just a check the box kind of thing. People see it. They don't, people aren't stupid. They see that you're just trying to check a box as opposed to you really want to live that mission. They also look at the structure of our organization and see that people are at the very top are people of color. And so they're able to say, okay, I see myself, I can be heard in a way that otherwise I may not be able to be heard. So all of these things I think play into it. And I think, again, having an organization that started with that as its foundation from day one, we started doing race talks the minute we opened our door, way before it became a thing, and that's been really, I think, one of our big strengths. And when we do exit interviews with our staff, they always bring up that moment of my interaction with them, talking about race. That's probably one of the most significant moments that they experience at work. Yeah. So we're proud of that.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk to, because you have a family-owned business, Rick, talk to me about your perspective, because we often don't hear from family-owned companies and how they're dealing with D&I. We hear from big, but I'd love to understand how you're addressing this racial equity.
Sorry, I was muted. We've had a diverse workforce from the beginning. In fact, my grandfather started the business really with by bidding on some business that he didn't know how to do, but he once he got the contract, he actually hired two gentlemen, a guy named Henry Woods and Lou Carter, and two black gentlemen who knew how to do what he had just sold. And they worked hand in fist for 20 years together, building a business, and then had an opportunity to grow another business. And they stayed with the business both till they retired. I grew up driving a fork truck with Henry and Lou, and got pictures in our 75th anniversary book where I'm working with them when I'm 14 years old in the slitter department or in the press room. Today, it's even more diverse. We have a number of employees from Southern Asia, from the Philippines, from Thailand, Hispanics. It's really very interesting to walk around and see today the population. Now in Baltimore, I'd say it's more diverse. When you go to Iowa, we're in a small town in Fort Madison. There's a Hispanic population, but there's a very small black community. In our Conneaut, Ohio plant, there's very small ability to hire diversity because there's not a diverse community. In Dayton, Ohio, it's again very diverse. So we encourage, we want skills, we want people that fit our culture, our values. We hire on values and train skills. That's really the story. And we have people that have gone from entry level to the C-suite in their careers, and that's from you can say Western Europeans to Hispanic to the black community. So I think it's making sure we drive home. It's really your culture, number one. Do you fit the group? Are you respecting your coworkers? Are you respectful of everyone in the community? And I really refer to our facilities and our groups as a community. It's a small community, but it is a diverse community. So it's making sure that I can show that that's what's come through my life, and that's part of our DNA. and putting myself out there and not having the other owners or leaders doing it. I'm doing it personally and expressing that and putting myself in front of people, and they hold you accountable, absolutely hold you accountable.
Yes, and employees are holding us more accountable than ever to live all of those mission statements that everybody put out there. So Christy, talk to me about how you're addressing your employees from an equitable, the conversations you're having in your offices, and how people feel comfortable sharing their opinions.
Yeah, I agree with Rick. I mean, this is a culturally driven thing, right? It needs to start at the core of the values that you have as a company. At GDIT and General Dynamics as a whole, honesty, trust, transparency, and alignment are our core values. And when you think about that, how can you be honest with yourself? How do we align? How do we trust one another if we can't bring our full selves to work and appreciate and respect every one of the characteristics that makes each one of us unique? And at GDIT, we believe that diversity drives innovation. What a boring world it would be if we all came with the same exact thoughts, the same exact approach to how to solve a problem. And that's important to our business, to innovate new solutions to solve an important customer mission. So our employee resource groups, as I had mentioned, have become even more important than ever during these times. It gave our employee workforce an opportunity to not only connect, but also to voice their perspective so that others could hear and learn from one another, which is opening up the doors then to allow people in a critical team meeting to be able to have that voice, but also enable other people to listen to that voice. And that is key to everything that is going on. And recognition that, that diversity is not just what you see on the outside, but it's other characteristics and our history and all of these things that make us up that you might not even know about. So really, we are doing things that we've hired a diversity and inclusion leader. We have ensured that we have unconscious bias training for all of our employees. We're having special diversity and inclusion workshops for our leaders because we believe it starts at the top and embracing that culture. And we even see our customers putting this into our RFP requirements of tell us about your diversity and inclusion and equity in your workforce and what this means. But we feel that, at GDIT, because we believe that diversity drives innovation, we have a leg up here. We've believed this all along, but it's even more important now more than ever that we give everybody that voice.
Angela, I want to wrap it up with you because CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield this has been baked into your mission for a while, this whole idea of equity. So talk to us about how you're helping employees feel heard.
Yeah, absolutely. So like several of you have mentioned, we also have a very diverse workforce. We are 70% female. We are over 50% ethnic minority. So we have a very diverse culture to start with. And Andy said a couple of things that resonated with me. One was, he was doing DEI before it was popular. I say that about being from Brooklyn. I was from Brooklyn when, I'm from Brooklyn and I was living in Brooklyn when it wasn't popular. So it just kind of resonated with me, that comment. But also that it starts at the top. As a CEO, it does start as the top, and you can set the culture of how important this is to your organization. So our CEO has done that for the last several years during the George Floyd incidents, and throughout this year, other incidents that created violence against people of color. Our CEO has spoke right into it, right, and spoke into these events timely to continue to stress what we stand for and what we stand against as an organization. And so, like Andy said, it starts at the top. Our leaders have also adopted that. And I think Christy mentioned our associates are holding us accountable. So we spent, and I would say, I'll back up a little, our associates are holding us accountable, and our board is also holding us accountable. We've spent the last couple of years training and spending a lot of time on this DEI training journey, educating our associates on unconscious biases, really talking about equity and inclusion, and also really reaching out to our members. And because COVID has really shined a light on health inequities. And so we continue to look at equity both internally and externally in the healthcare industry. And we feel like we play a role in shaping and reshaping how health equity matters and increasing equity across all of our members, across all communities. And I would also say that, we started with training, but now we're on accountability. We have recently included metrics, diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics into our bonus structure. So we took a survey in 2020. And, we took a macro look at the survey results, and we were doing pretty well in, diversity, equity, inclusion questions. But when you dug into that micro level, we saw different favorability scores were different between millennials and Gen Xers or traditionalists or baby boomers, minority associates versus non-minority associates. So you got to get into that micro level and really see how are people feeling? Does everyone feel like their opinion matters across the organization? So we actually took one of the questions, my opinion matters, and we said, you know what, we're going to tie this to our bonus pool, bonus structure. We want to tie certain other diversity and equity and inclusion metrics. We've tied that to our bonus structure. And so now it's about, walking the talk, really putting our money where our mouth is, and not just about training, but it's really about holding people accountable to creating that culture where everyone feels included and everyone feels like their voice matters. So, I really just would say you got to take a look at the micro levels. Training programs are great, talking holistically is great, but you got to look at your policies. You got to look at how your associates are feeling at all levels of the organization.
And I will say one of the interesting things that's going on in terms of accountability is it's not just your employees, and as you pointed out, your board, the public, is holding us accountable. Social media is holding companies accountable in ways we've never imagined. Your clients are holding you accountable. People are making decisions about who they do business with, where they want to work based on these strategies. So it's definitely made us all very aware of how important accountability is right now, which is great. So this is a final question, and I'm going to ask you to keep your questions brief just because I want to get to a couple of our audience questions. But it is really important that we talk about how personal and professional lines have been blurred during this time. So it's sort of, we always joke that there's no weekend. It just all seems to blur together these days. So with that in mind, wellness and behavioral health are extremely important. It's very important specifically to be empathetic to employees and ensure that you have programs in place that meet employees where they're at. So talk to me a little bit about that. And I'm going to start with you, Christy, about how you're making any changes to your wellness and behavioral health programs, how you're making employees feel like they have permission to engage in self-care. You're on mute.
So sorry about that. So this has always been a part of our journey, the wellness of our employees. As IT professionals, knowledge workers, you can get caught up in never leaving your screen. And so it has been important for us. We have employee assistance programs that have always been out there, but we've now made sure that everybody really knows about them. We're communicating that. And I want to touch on a few other things we're doing, though, that, we have peaceful pause moments at our company where, you think about, like, go take the time to do a puzzle or do something else to engage your brain differently outside of the screen that you might normally do. Here, we are teaching people how to meditate, every week in a structured session, should they choose to join. We have kindness moments to bring people back to get off the stress and recognize the good going on around you, right? Because there's a lot. But a big part of this is just engaging in the conversation in the meeting, right? Showing that empathy from the start of the meeting to remind us that we are all human beings We might not all be coming from the same place. Somebody might be having a really bad day, and let's acknowledge it and recognize it and embrace them and help them get through the day, which helps us all get through the day and be our best at GDIT. So I think all of that coming together, and we put that in our overall wellness program, but those things have come to the top here. One last thing I want to say, we've also invoked like important things, no Zoom Fridays. End your meetings in 45 minutes rather than an hour to give people a break between meetings, right? Things that are really important because people forget to get up and walk away, right? And then I personally am using my commute time to make sure I work out, to make sure I go for a walk. And I'm hoping that through that example, which I share with people every day, go do it yourself, right? Take care of you first. That foundation is key.
Thank you. So Rick, talk to us about how you're implementing any new programs or policies to help your employees as far as their wellness and behavioral health.
I think having these Zoom meetings and having the happy hours and talking about what people are doing. Some people are actually doing things so that they can talk about what they've done on some of these calls. If they say they haven't done something, the group's saying, get out, go do something outside of work. Flexibility at all levels has been added. So we have engineers that come in 3 days a week, work at home a day, take a day off because they've worked the hours. We're encouraging people to take time and to get a better work-life balance. We've changed shifts from, say, 8 hours, 3 shifts a day through the week, or 7 days in some cases, to 4-3-4, where you're working 4 days, you get 3 off, you work 4 days, you get 3 off. So you alternate. So trying to give people more home time, less commute time in some cases, so it saves them a little bit in commuting costs. So in manufacturing, it's a little hard to get really flexible when you got to make things 24/7 in many cases. But making sure we're getting in front of people, listening to them, understanding when they have problems. We have folks that have taken time because their family members have been sick, and we're sympathetic, and we have some flex in that. So it's not as formalized as maybe some of the larger companies and having services available every day, but we try to make sure we make people available when necessary.
Andy, talk about what you're doing, other than they have your cell now, and they have your email. So what other things are you doing so that employees, have that balance of behavioral and mental health?
I think in particular, our leadership team or our management team, which is quite sizable. I think one thing I think for those of us that talk about stress all the time or feel stress is oftentimes not about working hard. Stress comes from not feeling any control over your life, not feeling any control over what you do. And I think what we realize is not about just giving them time off, because that's important. Obviously, people need to have time off. It's giving them a sense of autonomy in their workplace, a sense of empowerment, that they can make decisions without being afraid to make a mistake. I think those are the things that take away stress from employees and makes for a much healthier work environment. Also, in addition to that, so we've decentralized, we've removed layers of management, frankly, to allow people to make decisions that sometimes maybe the wrong ones, but that's okay. They meet on, each group of our management team meets on a regular basis and kind of learns from each other. What are some of the things that they're doing? What are some of the things that are not doing, and what works, what doesn't work, on their own, without any of the top layer being with them necessarily. And they make decisions, and then they implement them. And they'll just communicate, we are going to do this. And if there's something egregious or something completely off, which hasn't happened, frankly, then we'll address it. But otherwise, it's being done. So we're finding a lot more work satisfaction because of that. Another thing is that we used to, for our management team, that if they work extra shifts, so if they have to come in on their day off or something like that, they get comp time, they get paid for it. We stopped the paying for it. They have to take it off. It used to be a way for them to, constantly be in that cycle of working more hours in order for them to get paid for it. And we have insisted that they shouldn't do that, because I think it creates a healthier work environment when you have actually a time to be away from work once in a while. So that's been also another policy that we do. We've increased the amount of sick leave they have, and we've hired a full-time coach in our team that actually takes time and coaches each one of our leadership members, so they have appointments with them. They can have an appointment that is because they want to make a decision, they want to help with that, or it's on a regular basis. They have a once a month meeting with this person in order for them to just then talk about issues that they want to talk about and get some direction from them. So this coach is able to kind of guide them, and he hears all of them and understands the issues and the considerations that they all have to face. And I think that's been really helpful as well and much appreciated.
So Angela, talk to us about, and I'm sure you have a lot of recommendations that companies should be looking at in terms of how you maybe change up your behavioral and employee wellness programs.
Yeah, I think this panel here has touched on so many of them. We are fortunate to have behavioral health specialists on hand here at CareFirst, and so we have absolutely tapped into them. We've also tapped into companies that have been able to really provide our associates with very much on-demand behavioral health care. We've also talked about just personally our own experiences with behavioral health, and so really trying to take some stigma away from talking openly about care that's needed, mental health that's needed, mental care that's needed. I think the other thing, I think Andy mentioned a little bit, just being more flexible in how people work. In the past, we had about 800 employees who would work remote out of almost 7,000. Now, at 95% remote, we've been able to allow our most junior level employees, frontline employees, to have that flexibility that they need, right? So we've leveraged technology. We're ordering laptops to everyone and redeploying laptops to everyone so that associates aren't tied to their seat, aren't tied to their desk, and actually can move around and take that care for themselves that they may need. And we've done some of the, those are some of the more formal things we do. We've done informal things as well, like no meetings between 12 and 1. We started that early last year when the pandemic hit, just to allow those who are caregivers to step away and make lunch for their children at home. We implemented caregiver leave for 2 weeks of paid time off to care not just for kids, but elder parents and loved ones who may have been impacted by illnesses. We've done Reset Fridays, where no meetings should be scheduled on Friday afternoon, to allow associates to take a moment, think about the week, celebrate accomplishments, and get ready for an upcoming week. And many folks on this call have talked about other things that we're all doing, I think, collectively. I think at the end of the day, though, allowing folks to have that open communication, that safe environment, so that if they are going through things, that there's someone there, that empathy is there, the leaders practicing empathy. We continue to stress that with all of our leaders.
Thank you, panelists. This has been such a great discussion. I do want to, because we have so many questions from our audience, I want to at least get to one or two of these, and then anybody who wants to answer can do so. So I want to just start with this first question, because I think a lot of people are thinking about how we do this. And that is, do you have any ideas, thoughts about how to help upper management have a calm relationship with their employees as we move back into the workplace? So I know a lot of employees, they have been able to sort of have this distance, and now we're back in the workplace. How do you help upper management have a calm relationship with employees? Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah, we've engaged a coach for most of the executives and some of the plant managers to help them understand some of the challenges they have today. So we've got a coach for most of our plant managers and middle managers. Some of those also are using a coach. So if they ask or if they indicate there's a challenge, we've added resources to help them.
think you said
Great.
calmer, right, Rhonda?
Yes.
Okay, no, I think that's that's a great question. We have been focusing a lot of our training on empathy and resiliency. We do think our leaders need to have those things to be effective leaders, and really asking our leaders to be flexible, not one size fits all, right? Really think about your associates' life and what they're going through, and walk a minute in their shoes. Like, think about what policies you're creating, what decisions you're making from the lens of others. So really taking a more outward approach to the decisions that you're making, the interactions that you're having, and less of an inward approach.
So as we all continue to work on what our culture looks like, and especially as we dig into the D&I conversation and what our workplaces look like, share with us, this is one of the questions, things that you might avoid, things maybe you tried that didn't work, that others should avoid. Anybody want to address that piece of it?
So I think, things to avoid is that it's not a one size fits all, right? This is very much an individual conversation, because every single person is going through something different. It might be their role at work, it might be their situation at home and what they are, and don't assume anything, right? So as an example, I have a gentleman on my team who, he has 2 kids, but he's a divorced dad trying to take care of 2 kids who he's the sole caregiver. Don't assume it's the mom, right? That's always in these situations. And then I think the other thing is just to make sure that, if you don't allow flexibility and choice, there's flexibility and choice out in the workplace right now in general, in all industry. And so you need to take that into account.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for your time. This has, again, been a great discussion. We probably could go on and on, because culture is such a critical factor as we determine what's next for our workplaces. And again, thank you for your time. And I am going to turn it over to Alex.
I want to thank all of you, all of our panelists, for being with us today. I want to particularly thank CareFirst for their leadership on this topic and their support. But most of all, I want to really thank all of our attendees for joining us today. Everybody will get a link for this as well, so you'll get to review any highlights of this that you want to capture once again. But once again, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for attending. Thank you for taking part in this discussion. Please stay safe, healthy, and enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the summer. Have a great day.